Welcome to the new studio, guys. I hope you like it. As you can see behind me, I've got all these people working for me now, crunching numbers, crunching those stats left and right, just getting all the best information out to you as quick as we possibly can. Before this becomes a scandal, I do want to address this right away. I need you to go ahead and ignore, see that bag right there? Yes, it may be a McDonald's bag, but I promise you it is not a bribe of any kind. Got it? Now let me go ahead and get to the point of today's video, and that is to answer the question, do stars matter? Do the recruiting rankings matter for schools each year? That is the question I want to try to answer today, and so let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first question I want to address is, do the class rankings matter? And so to do that, I'm going to look at the previous 10 years, so 2011 to 2020. And we're going to look at the top 5 recruiting classes for each year and see how that translated to success or not for different schools to determine if that actually matters or not. So I'm about to show a spreadsheet behind me that will show those years I just mentioned, 2011 to 2020. And for each year, I'm going to show you the top 5 classes. And then I'm going to transition to a different spreadsheet that will highlight each of the teams that won a conference championship and or a national championship within 4 years of having a top 5 recruiting class. So first, let me go ahead and show you this spreadsheet behind me, and I'll move my head in just a minute. But you can see all the teams within the past 10 years that had a top 5 recruiting class, and you're going to notice some common names that have won some championships up there. So when we pull my face out of the way, what do you notice right away? Obviously, you see Alabama up there quite a bit. As you know, during this time, they won quite a few championships. There's also going to be some other teams who are up here who have also had success. You're going to see Clemson, Florida State, Ohio State, LSU. All those teams were able to win a national championship during this period, but that doesn't necessarily mean if you have a top 5 recruiting class that you will for sure see success, because obviously with teams like USC, Georgia, and some others, Tennessee, obviously, that just having a top 5 recruiting class does not mean you will win championships, but it certainly doesn't hurt. Now I'm going to show that exact same spreadsheet again, but this time I'm going to highlight the teams that won either a national championship and or a conference championship within 4 years of having a top 5 recruiting class. If you see it's in green, that means they won a national championship and probably also a conference championship. If it's highlighted in just orange, that means they won a conference championship within 4 years of having a top 5 recruiting class. Let's go ahead and look at it. One thing I do want to point out before continuing is that if you see a team highlighted in green or yellow or that orangey color, it does not mean they won a national championship that year or that very next year. It could mean that, but what it does mean is that within 4 years, that recruiting class experienced a national championship or a conference championship. Let's keep talking about this. So what you're going to notice right away is that there's a lot of green on here. That means a lot of these top 5 recruiting classes experienced a national championship within 4 years of that class being in the top 5. You're also going to notice there's a lot of that orangey yellow color, which means there's also a lot of teams that experienced a conference championship within those within those 4 years after they were named a top 5 recruiting class. Overall, 50% of the teams up here experienced a championship of some kind within 4 years of having a top 5 recruiting class. So does the recruiting class ranking matter? To me, I'm going to say yes. Is it the only factor? Absolutely not, but it certainly is a factor, and it should be something that every team is shooting for, including my team, Auburn. Let's look at this in another way. So I'm going to show you another table, but this time it's going to show all of the teams that had a top 5 recruiting class within the past 10 years, that 2011 to 2020, and whether they won any championships at all, and if so, how many did they win during this time? That's conference championships and national championships. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, a reminder for this table, if they're in green, that means they were able to win a national championship. Yellow means they won a conference championship but no national championships. And red just means they were a bust. So first, let's look at the teams that were a bust that had top 5 recruiting classes but have not been able to convert that into championship success so far. So if you look on this list, we've got Texas, USC, Florida, Notre Dame, Michigan, and no surprise, you've got Tennessee. Next, let's look at those teams in yellow that had conference championships but no national championships. Oklahoma had 7 conference championships but no national championships. I'm a little surprised they were not able to convert something into a national championship when they had that much success within their own conference, but maybe that speaks more to their conference. Penn State had 1 conference championship. Stanford had 3. Georgia had 1, which I think Georgia, that's borderline bust in my opinion, because if you have that many top 5 recruiting classes and you can't convert that into something more than 1 conference championship, that says something about the program, and I think that is borderline a bust in my opinion. Next, let's take a look at these teams that were able to convert their top 5 recruiting classes into a national championship in the past 10 years. And there were 5 teams total that were able to do that. We have Alabama, who had 6 conference championships and 5 national championships. Florida State had 3 conference, 1 national. Ohio State had 5 conference and 1 national. LSU had 2 conference and 1 national. And Clemson had 7 conference championships and 2 national. If those stats did not convince you that recruiting class rankings matter, then I think we need to look at this in a different way. Let's start looking at those actual recruits. And let's see if the stars matter. Does it matter how many 5-star athletes you have on your team? How many 4-star, how many 3-star? I'm going to venture to say that it does to a degree. And so I want to look at how many out of these teams that were able to get a national championship in the past 10 years, how many in that same time period, how many 5-star athletes were they able to get? How many 4-star recruits and how many 3-star recruits? But specifically, let's just focus on the number of 5-star recruits they were able to get during this time period. And then I'm also going to do a conversion to come up with my own star rating. But let's look at what their star rating is. And the way I'm doing that, if you want to know, I can get into the specifics later. But I'm converting each player into a number. So if you get 1 5-star athlete, they're worth 5 points. If you get a 4-star recruit, they're worth 4 points. And a 3-star recruit is worth 3 points. And I'm converting that into a total to give each team a star rating for the past 10 years. You can do that math yourself if you want to. I'm about to show you a huge spreadsheet that has it all broken down on there, and then I'm going to go to a more concise spreadsheet after that. So let's go ahead and look first at the giant spreadsheet that has all this information on it that converts each team into a star rating for the past 10 years. Okay, I'm showing you this giant wall of numbers for one reason. I want you to see that you don't want to see every single number I have on here. Just trust me, I did the math. Look at this real quick. You don't want to see all these numbers broken down. I'm going to make it a little more digestible for you. I just wanted you to see I did the work. And so I did this work for every single team that won a national championship in the past 10 years and also included Auburn down here at the bottom just so we can have another comparison. But the number I'm pulling is, once I've done all this, if you see the green number on the far right, that number is the number I'm going to be pulling in, and that's the overall star rating based on that formula I just gave you, and that's going to help give us kind of an even comparison on what's happening with these recruits. So just trust me on this. You see the numbers, they're here. Just trust me in what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. So now let's take this information, put it in a more digestible format, and talk about what it all means. All right, so you already know these teams all won national championships with the exception of Auburn. Auburn did win 1 SEC championship during this time, but let's go ahead and look at these other 5 teams as well as Auburn and see if the top 5 recruiting classes and the 5-star players matter. And like I told you, I think they do. So let's go ahead and look at this first column. You see number of 5-star recruits in the past 10 years. Alabama had 42 5-star recruits. Guess who has the most national championships during this time period. Alabama with 5. Florida State had 22 five-star recruits in 10 years. They got a national championship. Ohio State had 21. Clemson had 27. LSU 21. And then look at Auburn down there. We've only had 11 five-star recruits in the past 10 years. And guess how many national championships we had during that time? 0. Yes, we had one in 2010, but that fell outside of the 10-year period I was looking at. Now let's look at the number of top 5 recruiting classes each of these teams had. You're going to notice Alabama, 9. There was only one year, I think 2018 was the only year they did not have a top 5 recruiting class, and they were number 7. Florida State, 5 top 5 classes. Ohio State, 7. Clemson, 2. And LSU had 4. And guess how many top 5 recruiting classes Auburn had? 0. Which is the number of national championships we've had in the past 10 years. Finally, the last 2 areas I want to look at are the average recruiting class ranking over the past 10 years, and that's we get that score by averaging all the recruiting rankings together. So you take the class ranking for the past 10 years for each team, divide it by 10, and that's your average class rank. And then the star score is that formula I mentioned earlier. And we can take a look at that and see how it compares to the success of the team. So obviously Alabama is up there with an average. This is the crazy thing. Their average recruiting class is 2. They are number 2 average over the past 10 years. And has that translated to success? Guess what, guys? It has. You can't ignore it. It absolutely has. Are there other factors involved? Yes. But you can't ignore that stat. Looking at the other teams that had success, national championships during the same time period, you had Florida State with an average class of 7.9, Ohio State 6.2, Clemson with an average of 10. They had a couple of years where they were in the 20s. LSU 7.4. And guys, Auburn has averaged a 9.7 recruiting class ranking over the past 10 years. There's really no excuse for us not having more success, other than Alabama's had they've done a much better job in the recruiting field compared to Auburn. And now if you look over at the star score, Alabama is leaps and bounds ahead of every other team, every single other team. Their star score is 971. The next closest on this group is Ohio State. We know they've had some success. The kind of one that surprised me is Clemson with 762, but they've managed to do a lot with the players they have, and I think that goes to the coaching that they have at that school. But as you can see, Auburn's right there, but what we've not really had are those 5-star athletes. The next thing I want to look at is what conclusions can we draw from all this information I've just shown you. Here are the 6 conclusions I have drawn from all this data I've put together. So here are those 6 conclusions. In the last 10 years, every national champion has had an average recruiting class ranking of top 10 or better. Did Auburn meet that? Yes. Every national champion has had at least 20 5-star recruits. Auburn did not. They had 11. Every team that was a national championship had at least 2 conference championships. Auburn did not. They had 1. Every national champion has had at least 2 top 5 recruiting classes. Auburn had 0. 60% of the teams who had a top 5 recruiting class between 2011 and 2020 won at least one championship of some kind. And 100% of national championship teams had a top 5 recruiting class within the previous 4 years of their championship. That is a stat you cannot ignore. So in conclusion, what am I trying to say? I guess what I'm trying to say is, 1, recruiting class rankings absolutely matter, and 2, the number of 5-star recruits you get also matters. Does it mean if you get a lot of 5-star recruits that you will automatically have a national championship team? No, but what we have seen is that you have to have 5-star recruits and top recruiting classes in order to get those championships. That cannot be denied. I hope you enjoyed this video and this breakdown. If you want to see me do some other breakdowns of data, let me know what you want to see in the comments below. Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you've not already done so. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this new series I'm starting, and I will see you again in the next one.